Okay. So real quick, shout out to Hot Sauce because you were like the first here, and your comment popping up made me realize the time because we're actually going a half hour early today because it's immediately after this, I got to go produce over at Mute the Media for another stream with no use in Dutch. So make sure you follow us, anyone in here now. And I'll try to say that between the two segments. But with that being said, because there's no time like the present, and we got to keep this concise. Sorry about that. I have to close another tab because I can hear Dutch and Aggro in my ear because they're already in the studio for me at the media. And I was like, there's no way I can do that. So I will just rejoin them later. Okay, I'm smiling, and the first thing out of my mouth has to say 1 in 500 of us died. So let me just get that professional face on, and then I'll do the intro. Oh, and I don't have a thing for Spider-Man, but it's like, okay, everyone, let's see if we can change some minds tonight. So Matt, the first thing we're going to talk about is the headline that I saw on Tuesday that was 1 in 500 Americans have died from COVID. And I would, even though that's the headline, I would like to clarify it's at least 1 in 500 because there are some governors who have chosen to skew the numbers so that the death toll is less. I don't want to say significantly less because that's a loaded suggestion there, but it is less than what is reported. So if by what is reported, they're like 1 in 500, that's like I grew up in a really small town of 500 people. That town is abnormally small. And so it's weird to think that on the grand scheme of things, it's kind of like losing someone in that community. Because like when you live in a small town that small and someone dies, like everyone hears about it. The whole community comes around, and yeah.
And that's the thing too. And we know that's just like a perfect kind of like if this were to be copy paste down the line, statistically perfect. But so think about a town like that gets hit with the worst, that loses maybe 10 to 15 people, right? Like, so I don't know. Like there's a number here I kind of want to give because like it looks like it's something I came across today. I was like, whoa, because I don't know if like we're going to talk about something like we're going to talk about vaccines in another segment. So I'm not sure if I want to save it for now, but it's like it all ties in is the thing. But I think I'll just kind of save it for now because there's a lot we can look at in terms of like the numbers right now, juxtaposed even like what a month ago, 2 months ago, and stuff like that. So maybe I'll wait. I'll hold on to that one.
Yeah, no.
Relevant.
Yeah, speaking of numbers, I apologize. I didn't mean to talk over you, but as of Tuesday, again, when I started researching this, 663,913 people have been reported of dying from COVID. So at least that many people have been lost. And it's not done. This isn't like the ending number. If anything, we probably will have COVID deaths like into 2022 at least. Like COVID might be like the new what's the word I'm looking for? Like measles, or like obviously polio is like a completely different disease, but if generationally, if you look into like our grandparents, like, yeah, you just like grew up where like every other kid like either had polio or has it, and then like has long-term effects from it. And so I feel like our generation, it's really messed up, but I was like, maybe it's my son's generation that like this is our polio, this is our thing, that like into the senior years of the people living now, there will be that realization because so much of the population had COVID, will look a certain way, will be compromised in a certain way.
Fuck it, it's relevant now. I'm gonna drop it in because to that end, I think we're looking at like, so maybe it's fair to say with that, like, so who is this going to impact even more? Because you're saying this can shape us. This is really going to shape us because it's like kind of a pivotal infectious disease or virus that's like, impacting our generation in a way that we haven't seen in like a long time, right? So I think it's fair to look at that, who's really being impacted like by this, because we're all being impacted by this, but certain demographics are probably being hit more. And so to that end, at this point in time, I think it's fair to start looking at vaccinated versus unvaccinated and things of that nature. And I found this kind of interesting, just given like a lot of the stereotypes you might have in, let me pause real quick here.
Yeah, he's just waiting for some loud vehicle to go by.
And we're probably good to go. Yeah, exactly. So I just found this interesting, right? So like in America, you have like a lot of stereotypes about like religious groups, religion, non-religious, like all the attachments people might put there, right? No matter where you stand or depending on where you stand. And we know that if you look at vaccination rates, 90% of atheists report being vaccinated. 57% of white evangelicals report being vaccinated. This is from Pew Research. Looking at it, as reported by Pathos. So, I mean, yeah, Protestants in general, 66%, white evangelical, 57%. This is the vaccination rate. Black Protestants, 70%. Catholics, 82%. Unaffiliated atheists, 90%. Agnostic, 84%. So, I mean, I find it interesting. Yeah. Like, I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I find that very interesting too. Like, I was giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, and at the end I was going to be like, yeah, those numbers all sounded the same, and I think at the end of the day we're all just people. But Matt, there was a group in there that was like kind of majority without a cause.
There's two groups actually. So there's two groups that stood out to me, right? Because to your point, most of those religious groups, like there was some variance, but they're all kind of like that, like high 60s to even like almost 80 percentile, right? There's two groups: atheists, white evangelicals. Atheists really got that vaccine. White evangelicals are in the 50%. Like, and then there's everyone else that are just saying and that's just those, there's a lot to unpack there even, right? But just giving you the numbers, y'all can go with it what you want from there. So
yeah, and I noted that when I was looking into this story that had all this like data about like how many people are vaccinated. So like on the country, we're just over 50%. It's 54% fully vaccinated. To be fair, a huge chunk of our youth and immunocompromised can never be vaccinated. Well, the youth, I think, eventually can be once they approve it, but like today, they can't be. It's not an option. But there's a huge chunk of that is just people choosing not to get vaccinated. And as we go further into the fall, fewer people are getting vaccinated every day. And that's a red flag considering we are now in Delta territory that is worse than anything that we dealt with in 2020.
And the longer this thing has bodies to jump around to, the more of a window it has to mutate. And if it's already hit this level of infectiousness, what happens if you have this level of infectiousness and it has like a higher death rate and like another mutation or something like that, right? Because like that's not fear mongering. That's a possibility. Every time you leave the window open for it to jump into, it could be less. It could be like a less like dangerous strain. It could be more dangerous strain. Like you don't fucking know. Like it's. So that's my concern. We know it's not that crazy, but people who are vaccinated are more likely to social distance, utilize masks anyways, things like that. Like, so it's all kind of goes down the line. It's a pretty big overlap,
Yeah. So like one state had data on like just how the death rate in terms of like vaccinated and unvaccinated, 3% were vaccinated. The 3% of the deaths were vaccinated, which means 97% of the deaths of the people who died in this state, which was Pennsylvania, were unvaccinated. So, and it's like you said, it's possible Delta 2.0 won't be worse, but if it is worse, that's really bad. And even then, if you're vaccinated, it might end up being a 50-50 because it can get through the vaccination. So it's in our interest to eradicate this before we have more variants. We can eradicate this if we're vaccinated. And now we have like numbers to back up that if you're not vaccinated, you're literally more likely to die significantly.
There's a lot of numbers too. Like the thing is, like within this, I think it kind of gets lost is you do want to look at like, you don't want to take like, well, it's useful to have like entire country like US. All right, cool. These are the US numbers. It's more useful to look at states, counties, cities, and things like that. And so to this end, you'll find that like, okay, maybe it varies a little bit in terms of like the level, like, so like that's the problem. The confirmation bias. There might be one like event, for example, where most people were vaccinated. But that's like one fucking event juxtaposed to what the trend is across a population of 330 million people, right? And so it's like, to your point, if you look at the actual numbers, like from CDC, like not just single events, but like the county as a whole, the state as a whole, get your vaccine. Like if the numbers are so I understand like at this point in time, if you're not someone who's gotten a vaccine, you don't want to hear this. So like, I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. But I mean, the numbers are literally like very clear. in terms of hospitalizations, right? Outcomes relates to deaths, even long-term effect. Like it's like the long-term effect's a little more murky, but like, I mean, shit's very clear. Like we're talking like orders of magnitude. Like it's just very clear. So I don't know. You guys do you.
Yeah, and to that point, the last number I'm going to leave you all with is that at the time of me researching this, which was just 2 days ago, 97,051 people were hospitalized right now with COVID-19. And 1 in 500 of those, obviously, at this point, you could say are expected to die. And probably more than that, because the 1 in 500 is COVID-19 and Delta. And right now, Delta is the dominant strain, which is worse. So it won't be us dying at a rate of 1 in 500. It'll be even fewer, 1 in even fewer people.
There's 33 9/11s in your hospitals right now from COVID. So
yeah, I never know what to ask for people to add in the chat, but I was like, give me some hope, and let us know in the chat if you're fully vaccinated.
I
am. So yeah, that swipe over the face is not like I am, but I am also fully vaccinated. That's just more like Spider-Man. That's I think where we can end it, because Matt and I are trying to stay to 10 minutes and we're already in 12. So we're going to jump right into another vaccination story. And this one was a thinker. I thought about this since I read about it. So yeah, I'm just going to introduce the concept, and then I'm going to ask you your opinion, and then I'll tell you whether or not I agree with it, and then we'll go back and forth. Okay, everyone, let's see if we can change some minds tonight. Matt, I saw on Twitter that a bunch of people were talking about this news story out of Florida. It's always out of Florida. That a landlord was going to require vaccinations for his adult tenants that were moving in or renewing their leases. And it was met with a lot of criticism. And because obviously there's a negativity that comes with getting evicted. And so what's your take on someone getting evicted because they're not vaccinated?
So I understand at this point in time, like I'll just speak myself personally. I'm really frustrated, right? Like at this point in time, I've like probably hugged my parents like a couple of times, like throughout this entire pandemic, because there's been a few windows where it was acceptable, like I've lost friendships, like we've lost like I've had jobs impacted and stuff. Like, and I'm not trying to like make it about me. I'm just saying we've all like dealt with varying levels of just stressors and shit, right? And so if you're someone who actually really is trying to give a fuck, right, when it comes to the social distancing, when you adhere to lockdowns early on, right, if you try to wear your mask, if you did your thing and got vaccinated, right, if you're like trying to like be like, avoid like large gatherings or small gatherings, like if you're trying to do what you're supposed to, and we're like almost 2 years into this, it's exhausting. Like it's like mentally exhausting. So I understand we're at a point in time where it's getting even more serious, the Delta variant, that you want to really start to target the people who are allowing this to continue on, right? Because the reality is if we were doing what we're supposed to, we wouldn't be in this position anymore. Like we wouldn't. That's my take at least. So I understand the frustration, but I think we're starting to get really nasty. Like I think we're starting to go too far. And like, while I understand like that this group of people, you could argue, especially the ones who are really vocal and they're sharing of disinformation and misinformation, things of that nature, like they're like a threat and they're dangerous. Like we can't start taking away, I think, like what our camp would consider like human rights. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think if you're going to say that we're going to evict people, you need to show me what is the harm of allowing them to be in this space. Like what, like, you know what I'm saying? Like if you're making the claim that we have to take them out of the space to protect other tenants, employees, myself, things of that nature. So I think you need to actually show me like, what is the harm if they're in their own space? Like what is like their level of interaction? So like maybe there's like ways to like mitigate that. Okay, maybe you don't have access to certain like pools or something like that, but like to outright evict someone to me is too much. Barring like, like if someone can show me like, and I'm open to that. I don't understand like the logistics of like their living space or stuff like that, right? So like, but to me this is going too far and just like creates an almost bigger problem where these people like it's just this is yeah.
So 2 things I want to point out is that if you just go off the headline, it sounds like the landlord's just being way over the top, right? If you read about things he actually says, he specifically says he will work with people so that they don't end up on the streets. And so I think his intent is literally just to save lives. I don't think it's like in other words, normally when you read a story about something, you're like, capitalism, greed. I was like, that wasn't the vibe I got from this, because like, we're in a housing crisis. Like, it's not like he's going to not find vaccinated tenants to move in. So it really is about just, he has this huge complex. I think it said 1,200 units. That's huge.
He has 80 to 100 tenants. Like he's got a lot of people who are like going to be up for renewal alone. Like, I believe, yeah.
And so really what's problematic is, in his state, he can't legally do that. Like, he'll get fined. So even if he wanted to do this, he's in DeSantis's state. It's not gonna, like, it's the last state that would allow something like this to happen. But I liked the idea that he was like, how do I make my individual community that I have some control over safer? And so he made it the case for his employees. Like, my employees have to be vaccinated because they're going to potentially endanger my other employees and tenants. And I don't want to say hypocritical, because housing and employment are two different things, but I don't have a problem with private employers requiring vaccines. I've worked in childcare. Like, I had to fill out special paperwork showing that I had vaccinations and that I had a negative tuberculosis test. Like, it's not an invasive thing. It's just to protect. And in this case, that was to protect children. And he's not requiring the vaccine for he doesn't want to require it for people under 18, his tenants who are under 18, one, because he realizes those who are 12 and under can't even get it. But yeah, I think it's more, I was like on a level of like, the needs of the few, or the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And what can I do to help something I can actually control in my community right now?
And that's the thing. I agree with all that until I actually apply it to the specific scenario. I'm like, okay, like that all follows. That literally all follows.
Yeah, like I said, it's moot because he's in Florida, so he can't really do it anyway. So like you and I saying like, should he do it? Should he not do it? But it's just more like, I'm like, what? I like his thinking in that we need to do more for getting communities vaccinated. Like, that should be the takeaway from this thing, and not turn it into like, you can't put people out on the streets. He's already said that wasn't his plan.
Yeah, but if you're going to charge more, for example, what's the ripple effect of that?
What do you mean charge more?
So he said like, okay, like maybe we'll do like a month-to-month basis where like we charge more, for example, like they'll pay a little more. But it's like,
yeah, it's a deterrent for staying unvaccinated.
Yeah,
I don't think that that's rooted in capitalism as much as that's like, you've got to.
No.
It's the same thing how they started paying some people. I don't know when that was happening. When I got my vaccine as soon as like the city was like, here's where you go. But then like months later, they were like, hey, we'll reward some people if I come in to get the vaccine, because we need not deterrence, but we need some kind of need to incentivize people.
Yeah,
I think that's
these like all these things don't actually like address like my underlying point. That was like, what's the harm being done in this personal space? You have to show. You can't just say they're unvaccinated, therefore like the many, and like, oh, they're hurting people. How? You have to show me they're actually hurting someone. We can't just assume because they're in their own personal home, like their home, like they're in their sphere.
Well, apartment complexes have like potential shared living spaces, like where you go and check the mail. It's all like super close, like at least.
So if anything, they should reduce the rent for some of the people who are unvaccinated, so they can't have those spaces, and they should just be restricted to spaces then, since they're unvaccinated. They can't go to like the shared common areas of that building, since you don't get those amenities. Since that, like I don't see how you can justify charging people more. If anything, if like, because again, like they're in a personal space.
They do that with concerts too. They do that with concerts where the tickets and like ball games.
You don't have to go to a concert. You have to live somewhere.
No, I know. I'm just saying that like charging people more is a current way that we're trying to deter people from remaining unvaccinated.
But I don't agree with doing that when it comes to insurance, healthcare, when it comes to shelter, living spaces. Like, I don't agree with doing that when it's things I think are vital, fundamental human rights. Like, I don't agree with that personally. So I just
I was like, I get that. Yeah, I was like, yeah, housing you can't argue housing as a human right and then also be like, but housing should be more expensive for the unvaccinated. I just meant like, the media really vilified this individual who I think at his core is literally just trying to help out his community. And it's kind of a hot topic because it's no longer about like employer, and it's specifically about housing.
To your point, that's a good point too. Like, because he did seem reasonable. Even if I disagree with like even aspects of it, it's like it's not the
Yeah.
It's not the framing, which is it's never going to be. So, which has been a common theme this week. Like, hey, wow, look at this framing. Oh, look at what like was not. But that's everything. It's always like that. Because like, I mean, think about it, man. Every story is really like this fucking big, and the headline picks the most juicy this part, right? And
Yeah,
it's
like if the headline was like, because he lives in Florida, he can't actually implement any of this. But this is what one person said they'd like to be able to do. No one's clicking that article. Someone says, hey, guess who? People are about to get evicted, which again, he's quoted as not saying that he would even do. Yeah. So.
And to her point, it's moot. So what this story does is not so much like, yo, this is happening. It's more of like kind of a like exercise for ourselves. Like, where is your line when it comes to like some of the things that we think should or shouldn't happen as it relates to people who are unvaccinated, things of that nature. So like, you know, we talked about private employers. Now we're talking about like, you know, living spaces, you know, and it doesn't matter in this case. We're talking like an apartment complex. I would like to see like, that's why I said I would also like to see like the layout. You know, not all apartment complexes are the same, right? So is this like,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Well, and like, yeah, for you and me too, there's like a little bit of a privileged take on our part because I don't live in an apartment complex. I live in a house. You live in a house. Like it's not a big, like my neighbors don't get vaccinated. It doesn't really affect me when I just go to check the post or I go to like sit outside. But like when I lived in an apartment complex that had like 200 units, we were all stacked right on top of each other with like the communal areas being very close knit. Like to where you don't even have privacy between the person right next to you. You share a patio with them. Like I don't want the person right next to me not being vaccinated. Like that wouldn't be like as I'm sitting outside and their patio is 6 feet. So like if the 12 feet that is both of our shared living space, we are not 6 feet apart from one another. So
Not a chance. No, yeah, 100%. That's why I like it. I would like to see like, you know, what's the layout here? Because like even like here, right? Like you got apartment complexes that, you know, maybe a building, lots of space. You know, everyone has like, you know, like it just depends like that. And that's where I'm like, yo, like I'm actually open to anything in life if you can show me, right? It's like all, cause like I said, the reasoning you had all is like literally like that's all valid, like all valid, like the thought process completely valid. So then for me to make the leap to like, let's say like Florida allowed for this, for me the leap then would be, okay, can you show me like how often are they going to be in contact with their tenants, right? How like because if there is like, you know what I'm saying, there's a number there, right? Where it's like you gauge like, say, all right, this is actually a decent amount. Okay, maybe this is like something we have to consider, right? Because you are starting to impact people's lives, you know, not just things of that nature. So yeah. Probably a few more details I'd like to see myself, but it's an interesting conversation.
yeah, and I especially thought it was interesting because I just think it's nice to highlight, like, hey, if you actually read this story, he's not the villain everyone makes him out to be in like the tiny little tweet that that's about the article, and definitely not in the headline of the article. So, yeah, I guess I would just ask for people in the comments to weigh in on whether or not they think that there's ever a situation with housing that you should require vaccination. So you can do you want to just hang out with the chat, or do you want me to try and make a third segment where you just talk about
We'll just go on this. Let's just go on this real quick, because the details are not even fucking important. It's just the general fucking concept I just want to talk about.
Sure. Okay, everyone, let's see if we can change some minds tonight. Matt just had something he wanted to weigh in on, so I'm going to let him have the floor.
All right. So, like, by no means am I like, you know, Mr. Expert or like the voice for political prisoners, because I've never been a political prisoner. All right. Let me make that very fucking clear. Most of you have never been political prisoners, I'm assuming, who are going to watch this, right? But I know a lot of people who have been political prisoners. All right. My dad was a political prisoner. I've had family members who are political prisoners. I have friends who are political prisoners. All right. And what that looked like in Iran for them was fucking brutal. All right. These were brutal executions, brutal fucking torture. And the reason they were political prisoners is because they actually were fighting back against and standing up to and trying to rise up against a tyrannical government, one that truly took away their rights, one that truly stripped away their rights, one that was killing them in the streets, right, when they protest things of this nature, an actual authoritarian regime. Okay. These were political prisoners. And you can find examples of this all across the world. There's lots of terrible governments that do terrible things to their people, right? And the people who try to rise up against that in the name of freedom, in the name of democracy, in the name of human rights, in the name of social justice, right? We know what happens to them. So for these people here who threw a fucking tantrum over an election because a narcissistic piece of shit, orange-haired motherfucker said so, okay? They do some stupid shit, and then you see the reactions of these people get picked up. They get picked. Oh, I did it for you. I'm a patriot. The fucking privilege, right? And now they want to sit there and call themselves political prisoners as if like there's like fighting some great fucking cause. You got Matt Gaetz like pumping them up like this shit. It's disgusting. It's actually fucking disgusting. It's the most narcissistic, vain, stupid shit ever. Like these are such wannabe fucking victims. It's fucking pathetic. So anyone going to this event, anyone promoting this event, the September 18th rally for like justice for these political prisoners, I don't even know what the fuck the name is called. It's just some stupid pro event. Any one of you motherfuckers attached to this in any kind of way, positive whatsoever, not outright denouncing it, scumbags. That's my take at the end.
Justice for J6 is what it was called. I don't have any pushback on anything that Matt said. And I just hope that it doesn't embolden something that's reminiscent of January 6th.
Someone just brought up a really good point on the last segment. Carnage. Aren't most air systems in apartments connected?
Yeah, we were kind of running out of time, but there is evidence. I think it was out of China. It might have been Italy. I can't remember which country it was, where they said people on this floor had COVID, and then people on this floor ended up with COVID, and they didn't intermingle with one another.
So check this out. I know a guy who does like HVACs, like all this like systems, and I have to follow up on this, but he's usually he knows his shit. So I was like, I might run with this. It seems plausible. He was saying if you look at different hospitals who've like updated like their like air conditioning systems and like that, like their ventilation systems, if they like did an update like post 2001 or something, they're having far like lower rates of like death in their like specific hospitals than in older hospitals, I guess. And again, I haven't checked that, like, so like don't run with that. Like that's not verified. That's just someone who I think typically knows their shit, who works in that arena, was saying these things. But you know, today's age in COVID, anyone can say anything about this shit, right? So, but I found it interesting, and kind of was where my mind went with the apartments and the airflow and all that jazz. So anyways, I know it was last segment, but did want to acknowledge that because I was like, oh, light bulb, good point.
Yeah, and Spider-Man, you don't have to include that if it's that's too hard. You can try to group them together, but like that's basically what the three segments are. I'm going to put my hand up, even though I'm sure I can never remember if I do the intro and outro, but I'm going to meet up with Spider-Man in like the not too distant future on Discord, and I'll just get his take on like what the best way to break up the segments is from that. But
yeah, let me talk to Mr. Bird shit.
But to that point, speaking of Discord, yeah, there's a Trickle Up Discord, and it's in this details, and I think it's in most of the other videos details. So sorry, y'all, I'm low-key multitasking here because I want to get a link for everyone for No Use for Laziness, because in just a few minutes that channel is going to go live. Meet the Media is going to go live with Dutch and No Use, with the topic of laziness and capitalism. So make sure you follow us over there, and don't forget. Go ahead. No, okay. I was like, I'm going to end it, but yeah, if you had something you wanted to add.
I was going to say, I'm actually hella excited for this one, guys. Like, I'm excited to hear what Dutch and I used to have to say, because this is actually like a really fucking important conversation to have when it comes to like our like baseline, like foundational like values and thoughts, and like how like this shit's also work human nature and what we're supposed to be doing with our time and shit like that. So I'm excited just to like hear what they got to say.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, so yeah, join us over at Mute the Media and read a book.